There's a lot that goes into elevating a professional wrestling match to a level that'll forever engrave it into your memory. It's a level above excellence. It's all-time classic territory. Case in point, Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa in a lights-out match. The first ever AEW women's main event in history had a lot of expectations to live up to, and what Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa delivered was one of the best matches in AEW history regardless of gender, and in my opinion one of the best women's matches in American pro wrestling history. We saw two stellar star-making performances in this all-out bloody war, but it was the excellent story that was building up for months that had us invested and allowed us to get to this moment. Yes, just like all of the other all-time classic matches that you'll remember for the rest of your life, it was the story that elevated this match from excellent to all-time classic and created 2 stars in the process. This is Tranquilo Club, and this is why Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa is a masterpiece. Now, to truly appreciate how we got here, we have to go back a few months. In the summer of 2020, Thunder Rosa came into AEW as a special attraction of sorts. Being NWA Women's Champion at the time, Thunder Rosa would shock the wrestling world when she would challenge Hikaru Shida for her AEW Women's title at All Out 2020. And despite coming up short in her match against Shida, Thunder Rosa quickly won over AEW fans and AEW personnel. So because of this, despite her being an NWA contracted wrestler, AEW presumably worked out a deal with NWA to allow Thunder Rosa to stick around on a part-time basis, and it was pretty universally accepted that it was well earned for her to stay. During Thunder Rosa's very first appearance on AEW TV, she said one thing that stuck out. She said she came to AEW to bring the women's division to the next level. And even if you weren't familiar with Thunder Rosa at that time, you couldn't help but believe her, just because of the way that line was delivered, her natural charisma, her presence. Thunder Rosa carries herself like a star, and the moment she appeared on Dynamite, you just knew she was gonna do something special in AEW. But still, she was an outsider coming into AEW claiming that she would be the one to bring the women's division to the next level. Eventually, someone from AEW was going to take offense to that. Enter Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, or as she likes to call herself, the face of the women's division. Over the course of a few months prior to the arrival of Thunder Rosa in AEW, Britt Baker underwent a huge character change. She stopped being a happy-go-lucky dentist. She went full villain on us. And for the better, we saw a side of her that we hadn't seen before. She was showing much more edge, much more grit, and it made her performances better, both on the mic and in the ring. She just worked so much better as a heel. It brought out the best in her, and therefore, it felt like it was only a matter of time before she officially would become the face of the women's division. And that's when Thunder Rosa comes into the picture. And now you can see how these two big personalities clash when both of their goals are the same. They both want to be the face of a division, but only one can come out on top. Their individual paths were eventually going to cross with each other, and in November 2020, that finally happened. On a November episode of Dynamite, Thunder Rosa would face off against Serena Deeb and try to reclaim the NWA Women's title, which she had lost a few weeks prior. For the majority of the match, it was a pretty competitive and even bout, and it seemed like Thunder Rosa had a pretty good chance of reclaiming the NWA Women's title. That is until Dr. Britt Baker and her assistant Rebel interfered and ultimately cost Thunder Rosa the match. And of course, Thunder Rosa didn't take this lightly, so after the match, she attacked Britt Baker, who was still sitting at ringside, and they had a wild brawl. Britt made her intentions clear when she cost Rosa the match, and Rosa made her intentions clear when she attacked Britt after the match. It became clear these two were gonna fight sooner rather than later, and because the feud got off to such a white-hot start, excitement for this match was very high. And because both of these women carry themselves like stars and have a strong trash-talking game, both of them wasted no time making this feud personal with the insults they were throwing at each other. Looks were being insulted, and Britt Baker even attacked Thunder Rosa backstage during during a promo. Every time either one of them was on TV, the other would make sure to try to sabotage their moment, and it made for compelling TV. This was by far the best AEW women's feud up to this point, because as said before, both women carry themselves like stars and both were gunning for that top position. And more than anything, it was believable. Both women felt like they met their match. You could buy either one of them coming up victorious from this feud because they're just that damn good. And that's how you build intrigue, that's how you sell tickets, that's how you create stars. And so the highly anticipated match between Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa took place on a special Dynamite episode, Beach Break, and they ended up having one of the best women's matches in AEW up to that point. It was fast paced, it was hard hitting, it just felt personal. And for the majority of this match, things seemed to be pretty even. Both Britt and Rosa were going back and forth, and it wasn't until Britt's assistant, Rebel, exposed one of the turnbuckles, which allowed Britt Baker to capitalize and send Thunder Rosa face first into the exposed steel. This knocked out Thunder Rosa completely cold, and Britt Baker capitalized once again by putting her in the lockjaw and winning the match via referee stoppage. Britt Baker managed to weasel herself to a win with the help of her assistant, but you just knew that this wasn't the last of the Thunder Rosa Britt Baker feud. Both women would go their own separate ways over the course of the next several weeks due to them competing in the Women's Eliminator Tournament, where the winner would earn a shot against Hikaru Shida for the AEW Women's title at Revolution. Both Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker were expected to get far in this tournament, and the chance of them crossing paths here was very likely, but in the end it wasn't meant to be, as both of them were eliminated by eventual finalist on the US side, Nyla Rose. Despite neither one of them winning the tournament, it would be announced that they would be on opposing sides in a match on the buy-in for Revolution. Thunder Rosa would team up with Riho to take on the team of Britt Baker and her assistant Rebel. That is, of course, until Rebel was replaced at the very last minute due to injury by Maki Ito, and once again due to interference from Rebel, who apparently wasn't injured after all. Britt Baker would get the win over Thunder Rosa. And yes, that's twice now that Britt got the pin over Rosa. Later on that night, after the championship match between Hikaru Shida and Ryo Mizunami, Britt Baker, Nyla Rose, and Maki Ito would come out to attack both Shida and Mizunami. They were outnumbered 2-3. That is, of course, until Thunder Rosa came out to make the save. And this would set up a 6-women tag match for the following Dynamite, where Thunder Rosa would team up with Hikaru Shida and Ryo Mizunami to take on Britt Baker, Nyla Rose, and Maki Ito. Once again, Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker found themselves on opposing sides, but this time it was Thunder Rosa who got the win for her team by pinning Maki Ito. But any celebrations were short-lived, as immediately after the match, Britt Baker would attack Thunder Rosa with a crutch. After several shots with the crutch, leaving Rosa helpless on the floor, Baker would add insult to injury by putting Thunder Rosa into a lockjaw. After the brutal attack, Britt Baker would stand tall in the ring, seemingly claiming her place as the face of the women's division. Make no mistake about it, Britt Baker was sending a message. She was telling Thunder Rosa, "You wanna fight? Then let's fight." This was her way of saying she runs this place. If anybody wants to be on top, they're gonna have to go through her. It's either Thunder Rosa or Britt Baker. There's no possible way for them to coexist at the top. That's just the way they see it. But now the feud reached a point where it was beyond prize fighting. It was personal. It was a blood feud, a legit blood feud. These women cannot stand each other. They cannot hold back anymore. They want to kill each other. So what do you do when it gets so hostile? Something so personal, something so ugly? Well, you put them in a match where they no longer have to hold back. And that's exactly what AEW did. They would announce that on the following week's episode of Dynamite, Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker would go one-on-one in a lights out match. Yes, lights out, anything goes. A match known to get so brutal that AEW cannot sanction it. Now, as if this match wasn't already big enough, there was something else. The fact that it was a lights out match meant it was going on last on the show, which means this would be the first ever women's main event in AEW history. And it was certainly a match that earned it. This was a blood feud that had been building up for 4 months now. And Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa have such a presence, such an aura to them that they were not going to be denied this main event spot. It just felt right. All those months of trash talking, all those months of sneak attacks, all those months of brawling, it all led to this. 2 women with massive star potential putting it all on the line for that top spot in the main event. It doesn't get bigger than this. Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker are fantastic performers at this point. We all expected a great match, but none of us could have expected the masterpiece that we got. AEW has done lights out matches before, so we know just how ugly they can get. But in my opinion, this might have been the gnarliest one yet, just from a visual standpoint. Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker wasted no time going after each other after making their entrances. And right off the bat, this match starts in high gear. It's made clear from the beginning here that we're about to witness a war. We instantly see Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa fighting outside of the ring. You know, there's chairs involved, and everybody's getting hit with them. Rosa hits Britt in the face with a chair, and then she hits Rebel with a chair. And this is great because it shows that Britt and Rebel can no longer run. They have nowhere to go. Britt and Rosa are just bringing the fight to each other. They even go over the rail and fight in the crowd for a bit. Then they come back over the rail and are fighting at ringside again. And then we get the first big moment in this match. Britt Baker hits Thunder Rosa with a curb stomp on the steel steps, and it causes Thunder Rosa to be busted open. And when we see her face come up, you just see one side of her face painted as usual and the other side of her face covered in blood, and it makes for a really sick visual. She looked like such a badass. Then we see Britt's bringing all of these chairs to the ring, and it leads to her hitting a superplex on Thunder Rosa onto all of the steel chairs. At this point, Thunder Rosa is taking so much punishment, but she comes off like a warrior because she just keeps on going. She does end up getting the upper hand, and it leads to the next big moment in the match. Rosa wedges Britt into the corner and puts a ladder on top of her. She then proceeds to dropkick the ladder into her face, busting Britt wide open. And I mean wide open. Baker is bleeding like crazy, something out of a horror movie. But she embraces it, and it just makes her look like such a killer, such a badass, and it adds to the overall drama of this already great match. As weird as it sounds, as soon as Britt's face was fully covered in blood, everything that came after it was just even more spectacular than what came before it. And now we're fully invested. We're on the edge of our seats because we're seeing these two women go to lengths rarely seen in women's wrestling. The best way I can describe the excitement is like when you're watching a UFC fight and one of the fighters lands a good hit and the opponent responds with an even better hit. You just can't take your eyes off the screen because you know you're about to see something crazy that might end up deciding the match, and that's exactly what happened. We continue to see some really crazy stuff, like Thunder Rosa hitting a Death Valley driver on Britt Baker off the top rope onto a ladder. We then see Britt Baker hit Thunder Rosa with a DDT onto a chair, and as if that wasn't enough, she follows it up with a curb stomp onto the chair as well. But Rosa kicks out, and that's when we get the best visual of the night as Britt Baker looks directly into the camera, bloody face and all, and smiles menacingly. And that's just pure professional wrestling at its best. That's an iconic image that will live on forever. We then see arguably the craziest moment in the match as Britt Baker brings in a bag of thumbtacks, pours them out on the ring, and tries to set up Thunder Rosa for a fisherman buster on the thumbtacks, but Rosa counters. We then see Rebel trying to come to Britt's aid one last time, but Rosa cuts her off and hits her with a crutch. Rosa then follows this up by dropkicking Rebel through the ropes through the table, and this is just some great payoff for all that frustration that Rebel caused Rosa for costing her all those matches against Britt. Back in the ring, Britt Baker tries to capitalize on Thunder Rosa being distracted, but Rosa counters and hits a powerbomb on Britt Baker onto the thumbtacks. An insane spot. At this point, my jaw is on the floor. I can't believe what these two resilient competitors are doing to each other. Rosa goes for the pin, and Britt Baker kicks out at 2. Just unbelievable stuff here. Britt Baker somehow manages to find one last moment of fight in her and surprises Thunder Rosa with the lockjaw. But Rosa rolls over, causing Britt to slam back into the thumbtacks to break the hold. Just a brilliant piece of in-ring work, in-ring psychology right there. In one last act of desperation, Britt Baker superkicks Thunder Rosa, which causes her to roll onto the apron. Britt Baker climbs to the top rope, but Thunder Rosa cuts her off once more and hooks her into a Fire Thunder driver, and she hits it off the apron, through a table, and gets the 1, 2, 3. Thunder Rosa immediately breaks down and cries, and for good reason. She just came up victorious in a war on the levels that we have never seen before. This was a bloody, brutal, personal, emotional fight, one that you'll never see in any other promotion in America outside of AEW. Like I said in the beginning, this is one of the best matches in AEW history, and one of the best women's matches in American pro wrestling history. Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker had star-making performances in this match, and it's so rare for two individuals going one-on-one to both have star-making performances in the same match. but they made it happen. That image of a completely bloodied Britt Baker is gonna go down in history. It's an iconic image. And the image of Thunder Rosa crying after the match was over is another iconic image that will go down in history as well. With this single match, these two women, Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, came off as the biggest stars in women's wrestling in America. I'm convinced that nobody else in any other promotion can do what they did in this match. And another reason why I think this match is on another level is because these two women didn't just elevate themselves, they elevated the entire AEW women's division with this match. This was the moments that the AEW women's division needed. There was a lot of pressure for the first ever women's main event to deliver, and they more than delivered. Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker sent a message to the world. They told them the AEW women's division is not to be looked down on anymore. When they're on the show, it's must-see TV. Let me put it as simple as this: the first ever AEW women's main event ended up being one of the best women's matches in American pro wrestling history. That's an absolutely insane standard to set. Thunder Rosa said it in her first promo on AEW TV. She's there to push the women's division to the next level, and it's insane that she's managed to do that in such a short amount of time. Then you have Britt Baker, the first women's wrestler to sign with AEW, who can no longer be denied the moniker face of the AEW women's division. The amount of improvement she's shown in the past 12 months has been a thing of beauty, and I think she's now more than ready to be the face of a women's division that's ready to take the next step. Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker had one of the best matches I've ever seen, and it's a masterpiece because it didn't just elevate themselves, it elevated all the people around them. It was a long-term story that was allowed to organically reach this moment, and it's surely a feud that will go down as one of the best in AEW history.